His back hurt. His arms hurt. I really don't want to deal with this right now. He tried to go back to sleep, but then he felt a sharp sting run across his whole body. Stay awake. Something hurts. A quiet and caring voice muttered. He glanced over at his phone on the desk, squinting to see what time it was. He can't tell if it said it was 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. Suddenly, a bright orange electrical light flickered from his arms. Mikey closed his eyes shut, trying to adjust to the sudden brightness. Oh, come the fuck on. Of course, you'd have to deal with this in the middle of the night. I guess you get what you deserve. The more critical voice chimed in. That voice still sounded incredibly familiar to Mikey, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Mikey ignored the distasteful language and slowly sat up to help him stay awake. Oh man, this one hurt really bad. It was a lot to take in. I wonder if this is the kind of pain April described when it comes to periods. Did April really have to deal with this her whole life? Man, that sucks. No wonder April is so cool and can power through anything. Mikey nodded sympathetically, thinking about doing something nice the next time he sees her. No one should ever have to put up with this. A huge shockwave of pain ran down his entire body, Mikey wincing in pain. He let the tears flow from his eyes, not even bothering to wipe them. The pain was incredibly unbearable. Mikey legitimately thought he was going to pass out. He started feeling warm and sweaty too. Oh no, not hot flashes too. His inner voice whined. The pain was electric and fiery already. The new burning sensation made Mikey feel like it was the middle of summer and he was surrounded by a wildfire, as if he was going to melt like an ice cream cone. Mikey began debating whether he should suck it up or alert his brothers. On one hand, this absolutely sucked ass and would last a while. If he called for help, he could get his medication and be fine. On the other hand, he didn't want to wake his brothers nor have to deal with needles again. But on the other hand, alright fine. Mikey sighed and then began taking a deep breath, ready to scream and, wait, did it just stop? Mikey paused and waited. Horizontal ellipsis. Oh, it did stop. That was the shortest pain episode Mikey had experienced so far. They usually last for like an hour or so. Perhaps he was only fully awake towards the end of it. Well, now he is wide awake and didn't feel like going back to sleep. I hate this. Why can't I just have a normal day for once? Mikey's eyes lit up. Wait, maybe I can. If I pretend to act normal, then maybe things will go back to normal. Mikey got out of bed and checked his phone. Ah, so it was 4 o'clock in the morning. Just a couple hours before his brothers would gradually start to wake up. Oh, that's plenty of time. Mikey dressed out of his pajamas and threw on his orange jacket before putting his mask, socks, and gloves on, then his sash over the jacket. He looked over at his handkerchief scarf on his desk. Just one normal day. He tucked the scarf away in his wardrobe and levitated his phone, watching it fly into his pocket and then walking out the subway car. That's all I ask. Mikey hopped from rooftop to rooftop, feeling his heartbeat in his tympanus. Mikey always loved exploring the nightlife of New York City, watching all the bustling cars go by from a high-up distance, the sounds of them honking and faint sirens in the distance. He kept jumping from roof to roof while slightly levitating himself to make him fly in the air for just a few moments longer, making his way over to Central Park. Once Mikey made his way over, he hopped down and began running across the street to the trees. He held his arms up in the air and giggled as he ran. It felt good to just run around and be free. The autumn leaves crunched with each step, sounding like a hushed roar of people. He hopped and ducked and dodged each obscure branch in his path as he ran. As he slowed down, he found himself at Hanging Rock. He climbed up onto it to get a better view of the place. It was still incredibly dark, only slivers of light coming from the cars and buildings in the distance. The ornate box turtle took out his phone and turned on the flashlight. Mikey hopped down and began exploring. He took a deep breath of air, smelling the damp forest scent through the fog. It felt nice not having to wear that scarf. He knew that he could get sick if he didn't wear it, but the worst case scenario is just allergy symptoms, right? It's not like he'll get really hurt. As Mikey walked, he found himself at the lake near Turtle Rock. He shined his light over at the rock. A few turtles were chilling on it. The lake was still and calm, as if it was made of solid. Occasionally, a leaf would float onto the water, rippling subtlety. Mikey smiled with mischievous intent. For a second, Mikey thought he heard his brother shouting not to do it. He ran over to the shore of the lake and kicked the water, making greater ripples as it splashed. He giggled as a duck quacked back at him, almost as if it was yelling at him for disturbing it. A strong sense of adrenaline washed over Mikey. He felt free. ecstatic, and most importantly powerful. Powerful, huh? He looked down at his arms, making a few sparks of mystic power before quickly making it go away as it started to burn and sting. He flinched at the pain but shook it off, trying his best to ignore it. The magical sensation felt rejuvenating. It's hard to notice what kind of pain he was in when his heart was beating faster and faster, pumping the adrenaline throughout his body. A quiet thunderous roar rumbled and Mikey looked up at the sky. It was hard to see in the night but humongous rain clouds were passing overhead. The rain started to lightly drizzle. Mikey reached his hands up high, sticking out his tongue as the rain poured calmly. A few drops landed on his tongue as the rest of him started to get soaked. The orange turtle giggled and then cheered so loud that a flock of birds flew away. The rain, the magic, even the pain, it all felt invigorating. He turned off the flashlight on his phone and then put it away in his pocket so it didn't get wet. He looked down at one arm and ever so carefully used his powers to create a little electrical flame in his palm to light the way. He clenched his jaw, gritting at the pain at first before it soon subsided, his arm burning like he sticked it in an oven. He ran back towards the trees, spotting a bunch of puddles forming on the ground. Mikey's brows furrowed as he grinned, sticking out his tongue. He leapt in the first puddle, creating a little splash as mud splattered on his legs. He chuckled as he stomped in the puddle some more, getting more mud on his legs. He turned over to the next puddle, taking a huge jump onto it and this time, making a bigger splash. Mikey felt quite childish but, in a good way. He looked up and noticed the sun rising on the horizon. He shook away the mystic flame and pulled out his phone. It was way past 6 o'clock, almost 7. Oh man, did he lose track of time? Mikey sucked the air through his teeth, feeling more air rush through the tooth gap. I still have some time. It's not that big of a deal. Mikey nodded and looked down at himself. There was mud everywhere. Well, he definitely shouldn't go home looking like this. Surely, the responsible thing to do would be to wash off. His grin widened slowly. Mikey ran back to the lake and then slowly walked into the water, the trim of his jacket just barely grazing the lake water. He gripped his phone tight and held his arms up high as he did a few little twirls in the water. Just then, his phone vibrated, startling him and almost making him drop his phone into the lake. He looked at his phone as he walked back to the shore, wiping the raindrops to see it more clearly. There was a text from Donnie. Come home. Now SRS. The message read. Right. Of course Donnie would check his location. Donnie always installed trackers in everything. And even if that didn't work, Donnie would pull some fancy algorithm out of his ass and it would be surprisingly effective. Mikey waited for that bitchy voice to speak up and criticize him. Perhaps call him stupid or something. But nothing happened. He felt like his thoughts now reached a new level beyond that, rebelling against whoever that voice belonged to. Mikey's expression turned into a devilish grin. Mikey didn't want this adrenaline high to wear off just yet. You know what? How about one last game just for fun? He texted Donnie back. Make me. Usually, Mikey would include tone tags when texting Donnie but this time he didn't. He knew that he couldn't take what he said back once he challenged Donnie, but he didn't care. This was it. Time to go ballistic. He cackled like an evil villain who had finally snapped. He put his phone in his pocket and then ran out of Central Park, climbing up a building and parkering away. With more levitation and less gravity, Mikey felt his phone constantly buzzing in his pocket as he hopped from building to building, looking around for anyone else who may be following. The rain began pouring even more. He grabbed one of his nunchakus with both hands and used his mystic powers again to swing around. The cold weather helped cancel out the burning sensation coming from his nerves. Mikey swung over to Trinity Church and landed on the roof. He paused for a few moments to catch his breath. He noticed how heavy his breathing was and began to cough violently, suffocating from the air. Shit. If his brothers found out he got sick because he neglected his own accommodations, they would be so mad. Mikey didn't understand why, but he actually liked the idea of his brothers getting mad at him. At least the attention he's getting right now was different than what he's been getting for the past month. It reminded him of being known as the problem child growing up. Donnie explained it was because ornate box turtles have a really hard time adjusting to captivity. And oh boy, was Mikey sick of being benched for the past month. He really needed this. Mikey, a sharp nasally voice shouted. Mikey spun around to see Donnie flying towards him with the help of his battle shell. Mikey suddenly felt like a little kid again. He cackled out loud, maniacally. Catch me if you can, Donnie D. Mikey taunted as he took out his nunchaku again and began swinging from building to building. His belly ached from roaring laughter as he wondered why this was suddenly so funny to him. It's like he absolutely lost his marbles. Mikey, don't use your powers. You're gonna get hurt, Donnie screeched, straining his voice. I already did, Mikey shouted back in a light-hearted tone. He smiled as he looked over his shoulder back at Donnie. His smile quickly went away as he saw the look of absolute terror on Donnie's face. Seeing the soft-shell turtle's eyeliner melt in the rain, he turned around and ducked his head, continuing to parkour away as the insanity seeped through another chuckle. The rain turned into a storm, the wind quickly picking up. Mikey was already at a disadvantage due to the pain he was in. He took a sharp turn, facing the direction of the wind so that he could pick up more speed. Unfortunately, it also helped Donnie pick up more speed as well. Michelangelo, please, you can't keep this up, Donnie pleaded. Stop babying me, Mikey cried out in frustration. I'm not, just, ugh, Donnie stammered, unable to talk clearly through his anger. Donnie's getting stressed out, maybe I should stop. No, Mikey cannot let him win. Mikey didn't know what came over him. He's definitely not acting like himself. It's rare for him to see this rude and angry side of his personality. This part of him that he named Dr. Delicate Touch. A true malicious and insane character that only comes out to play when things don't go the way Mikey wanted. Like when those delinquent, mutated band members blew up his favorite pizza joint. Or when no one took him seriously and flat out ignored him for a prolonged period of time. Mikey swung his arm again as his nunchaku wrapped around another pole sticking out the side of a building. All of a sudden, he felt a really weird sensation in his arms. It was like he hit his funny bone. It didn't hurt but it felt extremely uncomfortable. Then all of a sudden, his arms went limp and lost their grip. No, 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 not now, please not now. Mikey began falling from 100 feet in the air. Please, please don't do this, Mikey pleaded to himself as if his arms were sentient. The nunchaku swung out of his hands, flying off somewhere behind him. No, Mikey, Donnie shrieked. The moon dived down towards the earth. Come on, Mystic Man, time to fly, a hurried voice said to him. He tried to tap into his levitation powers but it was no use. All of his magic has been closed off. Nothing was working. The ground was getting closer and closer quickly. Too quickly. Mikey tucked into his shell, bracing himself for impact as he hit the ground hard and began rolling. Thanks to his tough shell and unique parkour skills, he was able to survive the fall. But he heard a small snap and felt something warm trickle down his back. It ached horribly and stung really bad. He ignored it. He popped back out and began running again, ducking around a corner. God damn it, it's a dead end. A narrow alleyway with a chain-linked fence at the end. Mikey ran up to it and jumped, trying to grab on so he could climb over but it was no use. His arms were numb and paralyzed. He fell back onto his shell, pressing against the crack that squished a little from the blood pouring out as his jacket hood tugged on his neck, making Mikey choke and gasp for air. He tried to ignore the pain. He had to. He couldn't get caught now. Mikey swung himself forward, struggling to stand and, Mikey, stop, that is enough, Donnie demanded. Mikey slowly got himself up, only using his legs. He turned around to see that Donnie wasn't the only one chasing him. Behind Donnie were Leo, Raph, Splinter, April, and Casey. Out of his peripheral vision, he could see Draxum running up to them and Todd skirting to a stop on his motorcycle. Wow, everyone came looking for him. Mikey was awestruck and began tearing up at that notion, hoping the others wouldn't notice from the rain. That villainous voice came back. I can't even begin to describe how much of an incompetent fool you are. You made everyone worry about you and for what? Because you failed basic orders and common sense? Finally, Mikey, buddy, are you hurt? Leo asked as he ran up to Mikey, reaching one hand out to him and another into his pouch. I'm fine, Leo. Mikey took a deliberate step away. That's right. Just tell him you're fine, you liar. Don't let him help you with the pain you deserve. Let me see your arms. I can give you some Dios. No, I'm not in pain. They're just paralyzed. Mikey protested. You are such a brat. You know that? Quit your whining. No one cares about you. Leo's eyes widened as his pupils shrunk. But wait, surely Leo cared, right? Splinter walked over to them. Hand me your weapon, Splinter said calmly as he held the one nunchaku that Mikey dropped earlier. But, hand it over, Splinter shouted sternly. He added, you, young man, are grounded until further notice. Listen to your old man, just this once. It's the least you can do after the burden you've caused to this family. Mikey sighed. He turned around, showing the other nunchaku attached to his sash. Everyone gasped as he turned, Mikey wondering what for. Oh, the jacket brushed against the impact point on his back. The wound was pulsating and Mikey felt the blood trickle down his shell. Noticing the blood drops on the floor, Splinter swiped the nunchaku and then walked back over to the group. Raph and Donnie walked over. Raph's breath quivered with anxiety. Donnie had a cold, emotionless stare on his face. What the fuck made you think that was a good idea? Donnie asked in a hushed voice. Mikey could tell that Donnie was extremely mad right now. Sure, he was mad before, but now he's furious. Donnie may not express his emotions a lot, but when he's mad, like mad, it's like he becomes lifeless. His cold stare pierced through Mikey. Don't you dare start crying, you idiot. I just wanted a normal day, Mikey mumbled. He knew there was no way out of this conversation, so he might as well be honest. Mikey, that was incredibly reckless. You snuck out in the middle of night, by yourself nonetheless. You don't have as much control over your mystic powers, so if something were to have happened, you couldn't have defended yourself. Furthermore, Donnie's voice trailed off, his rant going in one tympana and out the other. Mikey felt his face relax completely. His eyes drifted off to the side as his vision went blurry. He started to disassociate, allowing that voice to grow louder and louder, almost like it was full on yelling at him. You made them worry for nothing. You deserve to feel this pain right now. You are such a burden, a disappointment. I wished they'd never found you. You're so ungrateful. I'm surprised they still put up with you. I'm surprised they still love. He came back to Raph, placing a hand on his head. Mikey blinked his eyes a few times before staring up at him. Raph was crying, his brows furrowed as his forehead wrinkled. This is all your fault. Mikey's eyes trailed back over to Donnie, who was still ranting. And I could tell you weren't even wearing your handkerchief scarf either. So, sigh. Leo. The moon ended his spiel and looked over at the sun. Leo nodded and pulled out a thermometer. It's okay, you guys. I'm all right, Mikey murmured. Mikey, I'm not going to argue with you on this. Leo interrupted as he stuck the thermometer into Mikey's mouth and waited for a moment. Leo took it back out and gave it a quick glance. Yep, he's definitely sick. Leo sighed. Then that settles it. We're heading back, Donnie stated. This is all your fault. Raph leaned against the kitchen counter checking his phone. His leg bounced nervously. He was in the middle of boiling some tea for Mikey. I really hope he's okay. It was horrifying to see him hurt like that. It was horrifying to see him smile like that. Raph distantly knew, deep in his mind, that he was going to have nightmares about this. How is he holding up? He texted Leo. He's fine. Arm movement will be back soon, but his shell was fractured, so it'll heal in a month. Leo replied. The tea kettle whistled and Raph turned off the stove and began pouring the water into a mug, then placing a tea bag inside. It was orange and cinnamon spice tea, Mikey's favorite. Raph picked up the tea and started over to the medbay car. On his way, he passed by Donnie's subway car. The doors were wide open. Raph saw that Donnie was sitting on the floor, rocking himself. Raph's expression softened with fear. Something's wrong. His mother hen senses were tingling. You all right, Donnie? Raph asked as he entered the room, placing the tea down on Donnie's desk. Donnie didn't respond but instead whimpered as he continued rocking himself, scratching his arms as well. Donnie's piercings were lying on the floor beside him and his eyeliner was smudged, nearly wiped off. His nail polish was cracked and chipped from him digging his nails into his skin and possibly biting his nails too. The moon's shadow was casted across his silhouette, shielding the face of Raph's distressed younger brother. Donnie, you're doing it again. Raph pointed at Donnie's arms. Raph was well aware by now about Donnie's more hurtful stims. Sure, Donnie stims a lot. It's just a part of his character. But whenever Donnie got stressed, he'd start doing all kinds of things to himself. Scratching his arms, smacking his head, biting his nails, chewing the skin of his lips till they're chapped. Raph immediately sat down in front of Donnie. Hey, buddy, can you tell me what's wrong? Raph asked in his soft, gentle voice. Donnie couldn't bring himself to look up at Raph and kept staring at the floor. As he rocked himself, Donnie tapped on his wrist tech with a very shaky hand. Aftermath jitters. A robotic voice spoke from Donnie's device. He's using his AAC app whenever Donnie was put in a stressful situation. His speech would sometimes ramble more and more, but afterwards, once everything had calmed, he would always shut down completely, unable to talk or look at anyone for a while. Donnie referred to these moments as aftermath jitters, which just invalidates the severity of the situation. Raph remembered how Donnie went nonverbal for days after the fight with the Krong. It took a while for him to start talking again, and even then he was semi-verbal. Short sputters of words relating to the conversation. Donnie usually prefers to use sign language in order to communicate during these times because it made him feel more self-reliant. Signing became an extension of his voice. He only really used an AAC app on his wrist tech when he had trouble finding the words he needed to say. Almost like all forms of communication have been locked up in his mind. It's going to be alright, Don. Just breathe. Try humming a song instead of scratching yourself, Raph whispered in a tender tone. He kept his hands folded in his lap, knowing that Donnie would probably not appreciate physical contact right now. Donnie nodded and began humming. It was hoarse and shaky, the notes off tune. Some notes squeaked then relaxed as Donnie's anxiety spiked up and down. Raph listened quietly to the song he was humming. It took a minute for him to recognize what song it was through the shaky notes and unpolished rhythm. It was their Snow Day song. Eventually, Donnie's rocking slowed down. The humming smoothed out into a coherent tune. Raph nodded and smiled patiently. After a few more minutes, Donnie stopped rocking and humming altogether. He took a deep breath and then slowly glanced up at Raph before quickly looking down again. Raph slowly opened up his arms, smiling thoughtfully. Donnie hesitated for a moment before immediately leaping into the embrace, shoulders tensing for a second and then relaxing again. Tighter or looser? Raph asked as he cautiously wrapped his arms around his brother. Donnie squeezed his arms around Raph tighter, giving his answer. Raph hugged tightly back. Donnie often found comfort in pressure, in which he tailors into his battle shell. They stayed there like that for a long time. Raph couldn't tell how long. Probably a few minutes. You doing better? Raph whispered. Donnie nodded. All right. Well, I gotta go check on Mikey. Will you be all right if I leave? Donnie turned his head to the side, thinking. He quietly nodded again. Okay then. I'll be in the medbay if you need me, Raph said in a hushed voice. He slowly got up, picking up the tea, and then left Donnie's room. I gotta remember to check up on him later. I hate leaving him like that. As Raph walked over to the medbay car, he heard Splinter shouting at Mikey. Raph ducked behind the corner, hoping they didn't see him. Raph wasn't quite sure why he hid, but from the second he heard Splinter's voice, he knew better than to get involved. I can't even begin to describe how disappointed I am with you. Do you have any idea what could have happened? It's a relief that Purple had trackers on you. Otherwise who knows where you could have been. Splinter lectured. His voice was fierce. I'm sorry, Mikey mumbled. You ignored your brothers and continued to run off after we found you. I just can't believe that you would do such a thing. Why do you act so incompetent? You are a ninja. For crying out loud. I'm sorry. What am I going to do with you, Michelangelo? I'm sorry. Okay? I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Can you knock it off? Ugh. You are just. So. Dad. Cut it out. He's sick. That's punishment enough. Leo intervened, his voice cutting in sharp like a knife. Sigh. It's like I don't even know my own sons sometimes. You're always off in your own little worlds. Splinter grumbled. Yeah, I could say the same about you. Mikey scoffed. Splinter mumbled something that Raph couldn't quite pick up as Splinter stormed out of the room, spotting Raph eavesdropping. Splinter opened his mouth as he was about to say something but rolled his eyes and kept on walking. Raph sheepishly entered the room. He felt angry and bitter, but not just with Splinter. He was upset with himself as well, regretting the fact that he just listened to that whole fight go down. He should have stepped in and joined Mikey and Leo's side. Why didn't I step in? What's wrong with me? Mikey was lying down on the gurney with bandages wrapped around his arms and shell and a wet towel on his head. Leo was in the corner, searching through the glass cabinets over the counter. Despite everything that went down, Leo's eyeliner remained intact and not smudged at all. How does he do it? Mikey always seemed to have a positive influence on Leo, even when things go sour. And Leo always seemed to have a positive influence on Mikey. Raph sighed and gave Mikey a sympathetic smile as he walked over. Don't worry about him, little bro, he just needs some time to cool off, Raph said. Usually during a fight against Splinter, Raph was always hesitant to intervene. He found that it was just better to console his brothers afterwards. He never felt like himself during those moments. He's supposed to be the strong and brave one, right? Mikey replied with some attitude and chewed his cheek. Well, here, I brought you some tea. Sorry, it's not as hot, but I could reheat it for you if you want. It's fine, Raph. Thanks. Mikey sighed, his voice weaker and gravelly. Raph pulled up a metal stool and sat down beside Mikey, placing the tea on a small fold-up table next to the bed. Raph looked down at Mikey's arms. His nerves were glowing much brighter through the bandages. Raph chewed his lip. He needed to stay brave. He couldn't let his family know what scared him. How are your arms? He asked. Fine. Still numb but. Mikey paused and looked down at his arms. Raph watched closely as Mikey struggled to wiggle his fingers. His left was doing worse than his right, which made sense since Mikey was right-handed. They'll come back, Mikey added, turning to look at Raph. Mikey's face scrunched with mild irritation. You're making that face again. Whatever you gotta say, just spill it, Mikey hissed. The red turtle blinked in surprise as he realized he was subconsciously furrowing his brows and gritting his teeth. It was his iconic scowl. He rubbed the back of his head and then looked over at Leo to see if he was paying attention. He wasn't, or at least, it didn't look like he was. Raph took a long sigh. Just spill it, that was really scary, Raph said finally, not knowing why you snuck out or if someone forced you to. Watching you hurt yourself just to get away from us. Realizing you were out on your own in the middle of the night, especially in New York City, and that creepy look. I'm just really glad you're okay. Well, more or less. Raph met Mikey's gaze, noticing that Mikey was giving Raph his full attention. Mikey looked really tired. It's been quite a morning for everyone involved. Raph had a brief moment of doubt, wondering if this was all a dream. But it wasn't. Right now is real. Next time, just come talk to us. I'm sure we could work something out without anyone getting hurt. I understood how you felt when you said you wanted a normal day. I can get that. Raph looked down at the right side of his plastron, taking in the large crack in it. We all want a normal day. But the thing is, we're not normal. We've never known a life of being a human person like Dad was. Fighting mutants, catching ubiquitous, dealing with villain after villain. That's our normal. We never asked for this. You never asked for this. Don't beat yourself up, King. Mikey started shedding a few tears and Raph helped wipe them away, holding Mikey's face in his hand. Raph's hand basically held Mikey's entire head. Mikey felt so small in his hand. Raph felt emotionally small in his mind. Raph remembered a time when they were roughly the same size as tots. Looking at how much and how fast they've grown, Mikey smiled, rubbing his cheek against Raph's hand. Raph was the one that was more of a paternal figure than either of his dads. Even when Mikey tries his darndest to keep everyone together as a family, especially his parents, he already had what he needed his whole life. His brothers. You are such a brat, Splinter had grumbled before exiting the room. Oh, so that's why Mikey recognized the voice. He felt his lips tremble as he held back from crying. Mikey inhaled sharply and felt the dry air irritate his sore throat, forcing him to throw a coughing fit. Raph reached for the tea, helping Mikey take a sip and holding up his head so that he wouldn't choke. The tea was very lukewarm by now, nearing cold. Mikey wondered how long Raph took to get the tea here. Maybe he forgot about it or something? Hey, not to be mean but how did the tea get cold? Mikey asked curiously. Raph gave Mikey that worried and stern look again and then looked away, biting his lip. He answered hesitantly, well, after that stunt you pulled. Donnie got aftermath jitters again. They both heard a clatter of stuff falling over. They looked over to see Leo staring at them concerningly, accidentally knocking over the first aid supplies on the counter. So he was listening. Donnie and Leo shared a special bond that Raph and Mikey would never understand. It was like they were actual twins, both orbiting their own personal universe. Is Donnie okay? The son asked, trying not to raise his voice. Don't worry, Leo. He's all right. I helped him calm down, Raph said reassuringly. Aw shit. I should really apologize to him then, Mikey grumbled. Raph and Leo both looked at him particularly disturbed. Oh right, they weren't used to Mikey just swearing so nonchalantly these days. Mikey quickly flexed his eyebrows up at them and shrugged. Wait, he shrugged. Mikey looked down at his arms again, trying to wiggle his fingers. Yep, he can move them again. They were still completely numb but if he focused hard enough, he could move. He tried to tap into his levitation powers. No. They're still not working. Mikey leaned forward and reached for a bag of cough drops on the table next to him. He wanted to see how much control he had now. Oh, here, let me. Raph quickly reached for the bag. No, I can do it, Mikey insisted. He carefully grabbed a cough drop and began trying to unwrap it. Since his arms were still numb, there was no sense of touch or pressure to indicate anything, just his visuals. After what felt like a couple minutes, Mikey successfully unwrapped the drop and then popped it into his mouth. Honey lemon flavored, Mikey's favorite. Mikey was more preferable of honey and lemon flavored medicine so that it wouldn't ruin his love for cherries and grapes. Mikey took a look at the wrapper. The brand usually put some inspirational quips on the wrapper, and Mikey was always curious about what each one said. Get through it. The wrapper read. Get through it. Period. That was it? It felt more discouraging than encouraging. They could have said you'll get through it to at least make it sound nicer. This dilemma of staying positive versus staying realistic has always been a big struggle for Mikey. Perhaps there's middle ground somewhere. Raph, can you help me up? I want to apologize to Donnie, Mikey said with a serious look on his face. Raph turned to Leo for confirmation, but Leo just shrugged. Well, all right. Raph complied as he held Mikey up under his armpits and helped him stand. When Mikey stood up, he suddenly felt a shiver run down throughout his body. Right, still sick. Leo noticed quickly and grabbed the blanket from the gurney, throwing it over Mikey. Raph wrapped his arm around Mikey, helping him keep balance as his cracked shell wobbled in its place. The three of them walked out of the medbay car and over to Donnie's room. As they reached his subway car, Leo knocked on the open car door to get Donnie's attention. Donnie was still sitting on the floor, looking through his phone. Heya, Don-tron. How's it hanging? The son asked cheerfully. The moon waved, acknowledging their presence but not looking away from his phone. Donnie's brothers stared at him for a moment. Then Raph cleared his throat deliberately. Well, Mikey here has something he wants to say to you, Raph said. Donnie nodded, still going through his phone. Perhaps you could put your phone down for a moment, Raph asked slowly. Donnie sighed and then put his phone away, looking at their feet. He tilted his head forward and gestured his hand as a way to say, proceed. Mikey staggered over to Donnie with Raph's help, Leo following beside them. They all stood there for a long moment before Leo gently elbowed Mikey to get on with it. Mikey took a deep breath. Donatello, my brother, I am really sorry for what I did. It wasn't right for me to run off like that and risk getting hurt. I should have recognized how worried you would be and reconsider my actions. This whole situation was my bad and entirely my fault. I promise that I'll never do it again. What can I do to make it up to you? Mikey said in a calm and methodical tone, trying his best to make sure that his sore voice didn't croak from the soreness. Donnie looked up at Mikey's plastron and took a second to think. He opened his mouth as he tried to say something but then gave up and looked down at his hands. Well, first, I just want you to get better. Donnie signed in ASL, not maintaining eye contact. And I call dibs on the last slice of pizza, he added with a soft smug smile. Mikey chuckled and then nodded. Deal. Splinter kicked off his sandals as he entered the TV room. He hopped in his chair and turned on his favorite commercials. That's when his mind started to wander. Why can't those boys ever do what they are told? I've been the only one taking care of them and this is how they treat their father? Unbelievable. He felt his frustrated expression relax as he became somber. I sound like my grandfather. Splinter has started to take notice how much he's turning into his grandfather, even in his voice. Whenever Splinter yells at his sons, he could hear his grandfather's voice in his, to a T, and that notion frustrates him even more as he lashes out all his anger on the turtles. Splinter noticed that when he was berating Orange, he could see himself in the kid. He could see it in all of them. Their catchphrases, their ninja skills, their charisma, their behavior. It shouldn't have been surprising that kids mimic their parents, but Splinter mimicked his grandfather, and now his sons have mimicked him. You are such a brat, Splinter grumbled to himself earlier as he left the med bay. How dare you treat your sons like this? He never asked for this. He was never ready for this. He only had a moment to decide to take the turtles with him that day in Draxum's lab. The next thing he knew, they were huddling in a box, taking shelter from the rain. Splinter had been dealing with the loss of his normal life and childhood, not recognizing the potential future of his new adopted sons. He can't even remember their names half the time and constantly mixes them up. What have I gotten myself into? Knock knock. Splinter turned around to find his sons standing at the entrance to the TV room. Blue knocked on the wall, Orange was leaning against Red, and Purple kept his distance while looking down at the floor. His wildly emo teenager makeup was smudged. Who am I to judge? I was like that once, rebelling in my own way against my family. I guess I still do that. My boys, listen, about what I said earlier. It's fine, Pops. I deserved it. Orange spoke up. No, it isn't. You didn't deserve anything. You don't deserve any of the horrible things that I put you through. I was the one who went too far. I let my anger and frustrations take over. I'm the one to blame. It was never your fault, Splinter said as he got up from the chair and walked towards Orange, placing a hand on his shoulder, or at least, trying to, considering the height difference. Orange's lips quivered and then immediately gave Splinter a hug. Splinter braced himself for Orange's hug as they were usually incredibly strong, but this one wasn't. Orange's arms couldn't even wrap all the way around due to his injuries. Splinter felt his heart sink at that fact as he hugged his son back. Red and Blue joined in on the hug. Splinter looked up at Purple, who was fiddling with his fingers and staring at the floor. It took a few seconds for Purple to take a deep breath and then meet Splinter's gaze. Purple slowly stepped over to the group and then leaned his head on top of Orange in an attempt to hug back. Splinter smiled and gave a small chuckle. I'm sorry for the difficulties I've caused and for not preparing you to be great ninjas sooner and for not telling you about our history. The harsh things I've said to you were engraved into your behavior, and I know that I won't be able to take that away, nor do I deserve to be forgiven for it. But despite all that, you boys have grown into fine young men and I am so very proud. I will do my best to raise you the way I should have all this time. I love you, Splinter said proudly. We love you too, Dad, Michelangelo whispered. It's now been a little over 2 months since the Mad Dog saved the world from the Krong, the present day being October 18th. Mikey was hunched over his desk, working meticulously on a drawing. His shell was still covered in bandages, but it's only for a couple more weeks. He struggled a little with his grip, feeling like his fingers were made of butter. He had a pair of headphones on, listening to some catchy hip-hop and rap music. It honestly hasn't felt that long since the Krong fight. Time flew by so quickly, but Mikey was okay with it. It reassured him that he was closer to recovery even if he still had a long way to go. Heck, he even had surgery coming up soon for his arms. And while Mikey was still terribly nervous, he knew that he was not alone. His family was there for him to help him recover. The same thing applied for his family too. Everyone was recovering from their own individual battles. So Mikey decided to do something nice for them. A drawing of him, his brothers, April, Casey, and his dads. Mikey tried his best to capture their familial love for each other. He worked on it tirelessly, carefully finishing the line art in ink before going over it in color. It took him 3 hours to fix up a sketch that looked good enough and another 2 hours to work on the line art, having to pause to fix a mistake with whiteout. An additional 4 more hours went by as Mikey tried his very best with the color. After 9 hours of working on the drawing non-stop, it was finally complete. It was the best and cleanest drawing he's done in a long time. Mikey held it up proudly in the air, overjoyed. He sprang up, putting down his headphones and running out of his room to show his brothers. He sprinted to the kitchen to find Leo cooking dinner. The sounds of Spanish rock were once again blasting throughout the kitchen. Leo's body grooved to the music, his mask tails and piercings flowing with the rhythm as the sun's smile shined bright. Leo, Mikey shouted over the music. Leo looked up at him and then turned down the volume. What do you need, Hermano? Leo asked. Mikey ran up to Leo and handed him the drawing. Yo, cool it with the running. Your shell is. Hey, this looks pretty great. Nice job, Mikey. I'm proud of you. And even more proud that you captured my good side, Leo added arrogantly, and he tossed his mask tails over his shoulders. He handed the drawing back to Mikey, turning up the music again. Mikey giggled and nodded, running back out to the center of the lair. He headed off to Donnie's lab next. Donnie was standing up over his workbench, his goggles down as he worked on repairing Sheldon. What up, Michelangelo? I'd give you a fist bump but I still can't move yet, Sheldon called out. His voice was all fixed now. Hey, Angelo, Donnie said, not looking away from his work. Hey guys, I got something to show you. Mikey walked up to them and held up the drawing. Donnie took a moment before lifting up his goggles and then taking the drawing. Oh wow, this is really impressive work, Mikey. Even if you were hypothetically without your disability, I'd still say you did really well. The Moon's voice raised in admiration even if his face didn't express it. He gave the drawing back and put his goggles back down. Did you show Raph yet? I'm sure he'd be figuratively head over heels. Donnie added. Not yet, but I'm on it, Mikey said as he ran out of Donnie's lab and looked across the central area to see Raph hanging out by the skate ramps, looking at some skateboard trick tutorial on his phone. Mikey bolted over as fast as he could, then ran up to Raph. Hey Raph, Mikey heaved. He was out of breath from all that running and began panting. Gimme a second. Whoa, slow down there, big guy. What's the rush? Raph asked. Look, Mikey held up the drawing to Raph. Aw man, that looks awesome. Raph chuckled as he reached out to take the drawing. Right as Raph carefully gripped the paper, Mikey's arm flinched and retracted back. In doing so, the page ripped into 2 pieces. The piece Mikey was holding scrunched in his fist. Oh geez, it's all right, Mikey. We can smooth it out and tape it back together. Good as new. Sniff. Mikey. Heek. Ah, it's okay. King. Please. Please don't cry. Notes. Shout out to Hall's Cough Drops for giving me a title name LMAO. Note. This part has no more chapters, but it is a part of a series that can be found at the top and bottom of this work. Think of it as like a novel series like Harry Potter or SMTH. As an apology, here are some doodles from this story as well as an animatic to the song Leo played earlier. Shout out all my lovely followers and mutuals for giving me the idea and encouragement to write this story in the first place, especially since it came from some very personal experiences equals. Feel free to follow me on TikTok at @AzukarSkull for more TMNTYGTI content and diving more deep into Mikey's nerve damage concept. If you want LOL. Credits to @Dollybugs, @USelismith, @Casey Blyde, @MrKisacake, @Blacklight Collective, @HappyFoxx, @Danny Ayrtonline, @.QuillFun for the headcanon ideas and layer layout help equals. Dr. Azukar out. Wink series. This work belongs to